we're going to get started. Thank you all for joining us today. We're so excited to be here. Welcome to the Rutgers Business School Center for Women in Business. Today, we are shining a spotlight on Black women, our successes, our challenges, and what still needs to change. Want to quickly introduce our panelists. The QR code at the bottom will take you to our LinkedIn page. Please follow us. Lots of information, future events, etc. I am so thrilled. My name is Lisa Kaplowitz. I am the Executive Director of our Center for Women Business and a finance professor here at Rutgers Business School. I am so grateful to share the moderating today with Anastasia Bailey, a fellow professor in our marketing department, who focuses on the intersection of international business and entrepreneurship. I'm going to let her talk a little bit more in a second about what she does, but thank you for moderating here as well.
Pleasure.
What is so amazing is we have 3 incredible Rutgers graduates, and they happen to be women, and they happen to be Black. One of the themes we have at the Center for Women in Business is intersectionality, because not every woman identifies exactly the same. We have many other facets of who we are. The center, through education, opportunity, and thought leadership, what we do is we remove barriers, empower women, build community, and develop skills and confidence for women to succeed as business leaders. So with that, I want to spend all of this time really sharing the stories of these incredible women, their successes, some of the challenges that we can all learn from, and what still needs to change. So in no particular order, except for who happens to be on my screen first. Let me stop sharing this. Is Toka Rutherford. So Toka is a managing director at Chase in consumer and community banking. She currently is the product owner in digital self services, responsible for creating the optimal digital experience for all of JP Morgan Chase's customers, of which I happen to be one of them, coincidentally. Previously, she was the head of business engineering. She was the chief development officer for consumer, business banking, and auto financial tech. She serves on Chase's Diversity and Inclusion Council, JP Morgan Chase's Black Executive Forum, JP Morgan's Black Organization for Leadership Development, and many, many more. She's also an advisory board member for Horizons National and Horizons Newark. She lives in New Jersey with her partner and her husband and 3 daughters and Pomsky. And she graduated from Rutgers. She is a proud graduate with a BS in industrial engineering. Thank you, Toka, for joining us. Next, we have CHERYL CLARKE. CHERYL is the Chief Officer in Charge. She is the United Nations Resident Audit Office, Chief Officer in Charge of the United Nations Resident Audit Office in Kuwait. So she provides audit services, is responsible for all of that for the UN Assistant Mission throughout the Middle East. She is a former CFO, internal audit executive, evaluator, chief operations manager, and has done this across global companies in many different continents: Europe, Africa, the US, and even the Caribbean, which I know is not a continent, but she is a proud Rutgers graduate and earned her executive MBA here, is also a proud Jamaican residing in New Jersey with her husband and 2 sons as well. And we have NATASHA Hemmings, who is the CEO of Girl Scout Hearts of New Jersey and the first African-American woman to lead this organization. She is a lifetime Girl Scout and member of Girl Scout USA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Racial Justice Steering Committee. She was honored as a top 25 leading woman entrepreneur in New Jersey, made the ROI New Jersey's 2020 Influencers People of Color list, South Jersey Businesses Women to Watch. She serves on many nonprofit boards and actually is an entrepreneur herself, owns 3 key events, a wedding and special events company. She received her master's in public administration from Rutgers, another proud Rutgers graduate, has 2 daughters, and lives with her husband as well in New Jersey. So, and Cheryl, I might have forgotten your children as well, but I think you have some and a husband as well. So thank you all. I want to turn it over to Anastasia for a second and introduce herself and start with your story. And then I'd love to hear the stories of all of our other panelists.
Hey, thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here. We have such a powerful group of women and the conversation is going to be so juicy, as I like to call it. I am a professor here at Rutgers University. I've been here for about 4 years in the Management and Global Business Department. Prior to deciding to pursue academia, I did spend a few years in corporate America with companies like GlaxoSmithKline and Procter & Gamble, and then decided that I wanted to take that experience, combine it with, I guess, academic knowledge and try to study research at the intersection of international business and entrepreneurship. So that is what I do full time, and I am looking forward to moderating and I guess sharing more and hearing more about the stories that these women have today.
Thank you. Cheryl, let's start with you. One of my favorite parts of all of these events that we have is hearing the stories of the incredible people and Rutgers graduates that we have. So Cheryl, can you just tell us a little bit about your journey? Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for having me. And I do see you have a powerhouse of a panel here, which is very impressive. I do follow the Women's Center somewhat, but my journey is maybe a little bit different from the others in that I grew up in the Caribbean. I am a Jamaican, and as Lisa indicated, I am a financial accountant through ACCA. So I did all my professional studies in Jamaica, but decided when I was asked to join the United Nations approximately 16 years ago, and then being stationed all around the world, I ended up in New York. And I thought at that point, why not, even in my late career, I needed to learn more. There's always something more to learn. And I explored and found Rutgers, did the executive MBA, and actually did the entrepreneur line of studies in terms of, and because my husband is a self-employed and my children seem to be going in that direction. So I did that entrepreneurship, and I'm telling you, I've not been the same since. So I'm just encouraging women to go explore different options if possible. And because right now I'm working in Kuwait, I'm managing the office in Kuwait, and that in itself is a learning experience. So my journey has been through financial, from starting of clerical to chief accountant, financial controller, chief financial officer. Then I switched to audit or internal audit manager, then went into, so in terms of wide exposure, I can look at any aspect of the United Nations program, whether it's outer space, whether it's environment. So it's actually very, very encouraging and still is a learning experience for me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. Natasha, can you tell us your journey?
So my journey, when I hear Cheryl's accent, there's something that, comes up inside of me. My family is originally from Barbados, West Indies. And you could not tell me that my mother didn't know that Girl Scouting was going to be a part of my life, because she was a Girl Guide in the Caribbean, in Barbados, and traveled for the first time with her older sister and troop mates to Europe to see the world. But she never told me about that experience. And to flash forward 40 something years to say that I'm the first African-American woman to lead this Girl Scout Council, there's a story in between there somewhere that it was destined to be, is what I will say. This journey was very rocky and had lots of twists and turns. I did not think growing up in high school that Girl Scouting was for me. In fact, I was never a Girl Scout growing up. So to say that this journey has been very strange, but that I have embraced so much of it along the way has been wonderful. Standing here today and having girls as young as I was in kindergarten and first grade as daisies, and looking at the work that I've done over the last 3 years as CEO, I marvel in their delight when they see me standing at a podium and talking about what Girl Scouting has meant in their lives and what it means in my own daughter's lives. So I've done many things in Girl Scouting, from recruiting members, recruiting girls and adults in Perth Amboy and New Brunswick, all the way up to designing websites and writing statements and doing public relations for 4 previous CEOs before me to get to the point that I am today. And none of that could have been possible without not just the Black women in the movement, who are a constant source of support for me, but also the allies, those white women who lifted me up and said that you can do this, and there isn't anything in Girl Scouting that shouldn't be for you and for the women of color across the country. So I am blessed and supported by a family who doesn't think there is nothing outside of my reach. And that is the one thing that I will share with girls as long as I sit in this seat as a Girl Scout CEO. I'm very proud of the Girl Scout movement. We are building girls of courage, confidence, and character who truly make the world a better place. And that's why I'm so proud of the work that we've been able to do. So my journey has been, pretty rocky, rough, with lots of twists and turns, but all along the way, I've made sure to take advantage of any education that I have had the opportunity to go after. Hopefully later, I'll be able to share of how I got to the CEO seat and how I went back to grad school in order to acquire the credentials that I needed for this role.
Absolutely. And thank you. Such an inspiring story. And Toka.
Yes.
What is your
Wow,
story?
yeah, this is just so great. I'm already so inspired by the CHERYL and NATASHA's stories. So for me, actually, I've always been a technologist and an engineer at heart. You mentioned I graduated from Rutgers College of Engineering. I was recruited into actually JP Morgan. So my entire career has been spent on Wall Street in financial services. And at the time, in the mid-90s, it was this relatively small group of technologists. And my story starts with I was one of 23. In the group that we had, it was 22 men and me. And we were in a group that was fast-tracked because we had technical backgrounds, whether a comp sci degree, engineering degree, what have you. And they fast-tracked us into the training program and into technology roles. And for me, I started my career as a database developer. Today we call them back-end developers or what have you. But I started as a database administrator and a database developer. And for me, my love of data began actually before that through a summer internship. But once I was able to see the value I could add immediately in teams, because all the guys wanted to go for the front end experiences, let me design what the users are going to touch. But I was like really intrigued by the data and the relationships data had. And I tell people, back then, a large data set was a terabyte. Like we were like, how in the world are we going to store a terabyte of data? And I think we walk around with on our phones with that much data now. And so to really be there at that time of innovation was very, very exciting. Many of you may have heard of the terms big data, what it means to hold vast amount of data. Some people say data is the new oil. And so for me, that was like foundationally my career, starting on my career. And that led me down a path of various roles into technology leadership over time in building applications for the firm and delivering, the global footprint through that experience. And so I did that in finance and credit and risk in a variety of capacities. and, you know, eventually worked my way up to being a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer in the Corporate and Investment Bank's finance organization. So that was like really exciting times for me in that path. And I'll share a little bit more about that rocky path along the way today. But today, actually, I am now, as Lisa mentioned, a digital product owner. So I actually sit in the business. I am a decision maker about the features we deliver to customers on ourcase.com, the web experience, the mobile experience, when you need to go in and change your PIN, or you need to go in and replace your card because you're now panicking that you can't spend the money because you've lost your card. Any way you think of self-serving, that's my problem to solve. And even though I may not actually own all of the implementation as it relates to that, I own the strategy and the thinking and what it takes to actually make it happen, and working with our CEOs to do that. It's really, really exciting. I would say for me, in terms of the inspirations along the way, it's not like I had a lot of role models, a lot of Black women in tech. I mean, we talked about intersectionality at the opening. And so often I was, you know, pioneering or creating pathways that didn't necessarily exist with role models looking left and right. And I think that just helped build character for me in terms of what I want to be and aspire to do, but also how I give back in the firm and outside of the firm to create more Black girls and thinking about, you know, technology careers. And that's been just a passion of mine, to make sure that I role model it in a way that people feel it's achievable.
Okay, so ladies, each of you have talked a little bit in your conversations about the rockiness of the path. But before we get to the rockiness, want to focus a little bit more on the successes that you guys experienced along the way. So I wanted to start with this question, and it's about any experiences on your journey, on your path, where instead of the opposite of feeling like a pioneer, that you felt that actually your gender or your race was a non-issue in a setting where it typically would be. You know, what was that like? Was it surprising? How did it make you feel? So I think I would like to start, Toka, if you could start with your experience, I would appreciate that.
Sure. So I would say it was really interesting experience heading into like the pathway to getting promoted to managing director. And one of the things is certainly at the firm is like, what is the platform, the scope of responsibility you have and the impact you'll make at the firm? And I remember as my manager at the time, who happened to be a white man, was preparing me to be his successor. And there was a time when he, you know, people found it difficult to see me in the role of his successor. He was, you know, very impactful in the role and did it very well. And he was very clear that I was his successor. Like, he would share it with my peers, his peers, and sometimes that made it quite difficult to navigate situations. But nevertheless, it showed to me the intensity of his support. And that was sort of show, when they say show and prove, he was showing and proving. But it's not just the manager that is required to help you get to the next level. You need sponsors, you need advocates, allies, mentors, and we can talk about that too, but we need all of these various roles that invest in you and help you to be your best self and make the best impact you can. And so I remember at the time, you know, he was thinking about putting me up for managing director, and he was like, I know you can do it. I know, I see it every day. You're right there. However, I have to, it's like pushing a boulder uphill, convincing others. And what, you know, that was obviously a very difficult thing to hear, right? And for me, I just took that with, okay, so what do I do? Like, what do I have control over? Because I can't control what people think of me. But what I can control is my brand and the impact I make and how I show up in forums, in meetings, and in settings and things like that. And so there were a few things I set out to do. One, part of the reason people didn't necessarily embrace me as a successor, I don't think it was necessarily about race or whatever, but you know, that's a whole nother story. If I take all of that out of the equation, part of it was he was still in the role. And so it's hard for people to shift their mental model on the expectation of a new person in the role when the other person is performing it. And so what was great is eventually he moved on to the next role. And then the question is, are you going to honor the succession agreement? Now, there's a whole nother story because then I had a baby along the way. Like it's a whole nother that entered into that dynamic there. But nevertheless, it did work out. And so there were a few things I did. One was I knew I needed to win over others that didn't necessarily believe that I was capable. They saw me performing at the level I was, but it's like, is she really at the next level? And so what I ended up doing was using moments. Once, you know, as he moved on, is like now create my space in the role, redefine and reframe. And so by doing, and I also met with the key influencers, sponsors, stakeholders, and the like, to one-to-one. And I said, if there's one thing I need to change for you to believe that I am at this level, what would it be? So now I got feedback, just one thing, don't give me a laundry list, one thing. And that one thing became our agreement. And I said, I'm gonna meet with you, you know, on a regular cadence to update on how I'm doing. So I can get, you know, let you know how I'm doing, what I'm working on, but I also want to hear from you, your views. And what that showed to them was my interest, ownership, and accountability and improving and taking it to the next level. So by the time I was up for promotion, it was actually much more support. And that made it worth it.
Toka, I have to ask you because now I'm so curious. I love what you did about meeting with key influencers one-on-one. I would love to understand what their reaction was. Were they all for it? And then when it was time for you to come up to promotion, did they also advocate for you to do that?
Yes and yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think, you know, and for one, it required me to be vulnerable in the moment with them. And so that, and I think for some, not so much they were taken aback, but it was like, wow, she's serious. Like, she's not trying to shift blame or not, like she's coming in with real progress and real impact. And I actually didn't know that it was her doing this. That was the other part that I realized, is that when you are leading teams, people don't always know the role you're playing in shaping and guiding and influencing and moving, creating pathways, right? Because it goes unseen. And it sometimes, unless you're shouting it from the rooftops, and that's just not my style. So that became a way of building trust. And the other thing it let me do was build relationships and help them understand my form of decision-making. So that remember I said I love data, right? That I use data to inform my decisions, that I'm not just coming at it emotionally or based on relationships solely, right?
Yeah, there's a great report that actually just came out from McKinsey. McKinsey just produced one, and separately, I think Lean In did. I don't know if they were doing it together, on the state of Black women in the workplace. It just came out in the last couple of days. And one of the things that was highlighted was the fact that Black women have much less exposure to key influencers and executives, either formally or informally through their networks. And so, Toka, I think your example is so powerful for so many different reasons, to get in front of those influencers, but also to put yourself out there and say, hey, I'm going to meet with you. Therefore, I'm going to hold myself accountable to doing what you say I need to do. And if I do, then I want you to be accountable for helping me get to where I should be. So it's such a two-way amazing street.
Yeah, so I think it's fantastic because Toka's story, you know, she was obviously excelling at what she was doing. You were recognized and you were fast-tracked, and that's how the pace was set, I think, for you. But now I want to shift a bit to Natasha's story. And share with us a little bit about your journey in terms of getting all the requirements and things you needed to be in the role you're currently in. I think there's a interesting journey you were on with getting your master's in public administrations with a particular concentration in nonprofit leadership. Could you share with us your journey and the story behind why you chose to do that and how it mattered?
So thank you for that question. I love Toka's story. And I'm going to lift it up this way. This is not the first time that I ever applied to be a Girl Scout CEO. There is a very small percentage of Black women across the country who are Girl Scout CEOs. I think it's less than 10%. So when I started in Girl Scouting 21 years ago, it was never my dream to be a CEO. I was looking for a job where I could help girls thrive. And that's all that I thought my ceiling was. And over the course of those 20 years, I never thought that an interview or anything would come my way, or that I would express interest or be interested. But I saw the work of the CEOs, white and Black women before me, the Michelle Tuck Ponders, the Mary Connells, that then inspired me to want to do more and to learn the business from the inside out. I applied to be a CEO the first time in 2013. I had gotten my bachelor's degree from the College of New Jersey and in communications and theater, and that was my focus. That's what I was doing for about 20 or so years. And when I applied for the job, having sat down several interviews with the search committee, who were all then board members who had seen my work and experiences, every word that came out of the CEO's mouth was words that I penned for them to say. Every meeting that we had put together were things that I had set the agenda or the strategic direction for. And that committee said to me, you got to the final round of interviews, and I asked the critical question, so why didn't I get the job? And they each came back to me separately and said, the only thing that you didn't have that the other two final candidates had was an advanced degree. I hadn't gone back to school to get my master's degree in all of that time. That's important to know because it's not a requirement on the position description to have an advanced degree. But that's what was lifted up as the reason why I was not moving on to the final round. So that was in 2013. And by the fall, that was the summer of 2013. By the fall, guess who was in school? I was in school at Rutgers University, School of Public Affairs and Administration, going after my master's degree in public administration with a specialization in nonprofit management, because I knew that the work lifted me. I knew that I was interested in this work. I knew that I wanted to advocate for girls in this country, especially girls of color, especially Black girls who could see me standing there. So that's why I went back to school, because of the denial that I would not get this role. I didn't want that to be the reason that I was denied the role in the future. I graduated in 2016, and in 2017, the CEO who preceded me resigned. I got 2 phone calls that afternoon when the announcement went out. And mind you, I was a volunteer leading a Girl Scout troop of 32 multi-level girls in Girl Scouting when I got the call. One was from a colleague who said, we can't be friends anymore if you don't go after this job. And the other was from my then CEO, who had beat me out for the job, Ginny Marino Hill, saying, we need to talk. So when I talk about the rocky nature of my ascension to this role, those are the stories that will remind me of where I came from and what I had to go after in order to get not just the credentials, but also the experience. Clearly, I wasn't ready in 2013 to be a CEO. But over the course of from 2013, between the work that I did in grad school and the gaps that I then filled along with my ally in the CEO who had beat me out for the job, to take on profit and loss responsibility. She and the CFO taught me how to read a balance sheet and how to work with fund development in order to expand our giving platforms and run campaigns. So it was an opportunity for me then to take that loss of not getting the job and turn it into something positive for myself. So I'm blessed. I know that I'm blessed. But those lessons along the way, sometimes it's hard for us to learn from those lessons. So I learned so much, just even in the prep for this panel from CHERYL and Toka, that I know that I can build on for myself.
Great. Oh, go ahead, Anastasia.
Yeah, thank you so much, Natasha, for sharing that experience and how recognizing the gap in terms of what you need and the role of others and helping, and the trust that you had in believing and trying to go after it. It's inspirational, and it shows your persistence and the persistence that I guess we should have, and be willing to learn from others that may, pull us aside and have something to share and trust that they're trying to help us. So I want to let CHERYL jump in on the conversation a little bit here. You have been patiently waiting, but I have a specific question in mind for you, but I wanted to, before I ask, I give you the opportunity to say anything on the idea of, the successes or experiences where you felt that being a woman or your gender was, or being a Black woman was less of an issue, or you were able to get the help or support or thrive in a way that you were surprised?
Well, for me, first of all, I must say that I'm working for the United Nations, but anything I say at this forum, it's my opinion and not that of the United Nations. I need to make that very clear and specific. But for me, interestingly, and I just love Toka's stories and NATASHA with the Girl Scouts and the data management. And it is just so inspiring to listen to stories like these, to know that we can do it. But in my instance, I said I had a background in accounting. I had gone through a lot of major chief roles and things like that. But after I graduated from with my executive MBA from Rutgers, I was doing a lot of data mining, research and things like that. And so I said, there is an arm within the UN, and we do look at, for example, programs. We want to ensure the efficiency and effectiveness of programs to make sure that whatever program we're looking at, it is economical and we're fulfilling our mandate at the United Nations. So I said there is an arm in internal oversight of evaluations, which goes a little bit more detailed than we do in audit in terms of looking at doing researches and looking at these programs. And I asked to move across to the evaluation sections. And there I spent 2 years. Now, when I came back, I came back to my substantive post in audit, and I was called to the office and they asked, there's an opening in Kuwait. Would you be interested in that? And I said, what? Nope. I said no. Middle East, Afghanistan, Iraq, no. But Kuwait, beautiful beauty station, but it's also anti-women. So it was interesting. I was like taken aback. Why would they asked me if I want to go there. And then they went in and said, CHERYL, with your personality and you being a woman, we distinctly want a woman in that job. And I sat back and they said, it came from the highest level to ask for you to actually be the representative for that office. Because in fact, the representative of the Secretary General in both Afghanistan and Iraq is a woman. And we want a woman to run the oversight office to manage the team building and just to managing the dynamics of that office. And with your personality, with your background coming from evaluations, looking at the programs, your financial experience, because we also manage the joint support office in that section, they said that in the detailed internal controls monitoring, they wanted that expertise there. And it took me a while to sit back and said, okay, let me discuss it with my family to see how I move forward with that. But it was just so interesting, and it felt encouraging that they actually did identify the need for an expertise of a woman within that role, and that woman happened to be me. So that was very uplifting and encouraging. And it just so happened that the United Nations at this point in time with the Secretary General, he is promoting women to be in top senior posts, and they are deliberately pushing for this to happen. So it is actually measurable quantities now within KPIs, key performance indicators, that they need to ensure that whatever role, there must be at least a woman on that short listed before it can move forward. And they need to justify that the woman cannot fill that role before they can even recommend a man. So I'm just at the stage at the United Nations now where things like this is happening, which is very, very enlightening. I must say, though, that it is not that it is handed to you. You have to qualify, you have to have the expertise, you must have the knowledge, and you have to deliver. Because we know that as women, it is twice as high. The expectation is so much higher for a woman, and more so over a Black woman, a woman of color, a woman in the minority. And so it is not a free gift, and I know that. The expectations is very, very high. So in terms of understanding that, for example, at the United Nations, I am a certified trainer for United to Respect. You have to know how to treat people. You have to, because we as women, sometimes we fall down in this regard. And so we have to be very, very conscious of this fact. And that is why they asked me in particular to take that role, to make sure that women in that section of the world are treated with respect, they feel that they have a voice, they feel that they can be heard. And I am just so honored to be doing that presently. And I'm just taking it from there, one day at a time. But for me, it's a blessing.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. There was several finger snaps and head nods.
Yes.
Look, is there any comment or resonating point that came to your mind that you just wanted to touch on before we, Toka or Natasha, what were you thinking when you were?
Well, it's just the whole perception. I mean, a little bit of what I talked about in sharing my story is just the expectation you don't always understand, and it's not always shared with you. And so the question becomes, how do you navigate those moments and navigate through things like imposter syndrome, and then you talk, like my network is very diverse. So I have good relationships where I can talk like this with white people, white men, white women. And so to hear them say to me like, oh, I was in that meeting, I didn't know what I was talking about, or I took a leap of faith, I think in that meeting, I'm like, wow, you come off with so much conviction. It's like, oh yeah, I felt 80% confident in that statement, or there's still a gap. And I think for women in particular, often we feel, and we see this, and I know we've all read this, it's like, I need to be 100% qualified for the role to apply for it, or to think that I am capable. Meanwhile, men will be half as qualified or whatever, and they believe they can do more than that. And so I think part of it is I'll never forget, this was a white woman who shared this with me years ago. It was like around that time when I was in that journey around managing director. And she's like, you gotta get out of your own head. She's like, if you have a seat at the table, you have a seat at the table. Like, you have the seat at the table. So what are you gonna do? And it was like, You know, I was like, okay, so what am I going to do? I got to be real clear on that. And so just being able to have those kind of conversations with people is so important. People at your organization that know the dynamics, that know the culture, that know the people, and can share with you pure, and they can't be vested in your work. They have to be vested in you. And that means that, because when they're vested in the work, they're biased. They're biased in the outcome, I'll put it that way. But when they're vested in you, it's different. It's much more intentional in your performance, because they're not vested in the outcome of the performance. They're just helping you along or just building a relationship. I think that's just really, that's been great advice I've received over the years as I've been on my journey.
Toka, one of the things that you said was really interesting, and I actually heard it from every single one of you in one way or another. There were people within your organization who saw something in you that you might not have seen in yourself. And that doesn't take away anything from your capabilities and what it is that you're able to do. But it's actually interesting, because why are those expectations of yourself not as high as other people are seeing? And, you know, this is something all women in general, and I'm venturing that it's even harder for Black women to have those expectations, because I'm a huge believer of, you know, she looks like me. And if you don't see her, then you don't really understand that you could do it yourself, even though you can. So, and you could be incredible and smart and just as skilled as everyone else, but there's still barriers that need to be removed. So how have you yourself gotten to that point where you believe what others are seeing in you that you haven't seen in yourself yet? What are the hacks, as my kids would call them, that you've given to yourself to help develop that confidence, to realize, you know what, I am at this table. I deserve to be at this table. I'm going to be the change that I want to see. What are some of the specific things that you all have employed in yourself?
Should I jump in? So when you asked that question, I wish I had brought my patch. I have a patch. Every Girl Scout CEO gets to design their own Girl Scout patch. And my patch has that Mahatma Gandhi quote, "Be the change." You know, it goes with be the change that you want to see in the world, not to stand on the sidelines. If you want change for your community, you have to inspire that change and lead that change in order for change to truly come. This role in this job, and even roles that I will have in the future and jobs that I will have in the future, always have to have that change maker mentality as a part of it. I am only as good as the people who came before me in this role, or I'm only as good as the people who will come behind me for this role. It's like a combination weaved through. And because this is such a pivotal role in the future of girls in this country, in the future leaders in this country, I take it so seriously. When I don't have a space in the room, the hack that I use, Lisa, is that I pull up a folding chair. I come up to the person who is talking the most and lean in on them to ask them how they got where they are. I get them talking about themselves. Tell me your story. And most times after the meeting is over, they think that I've taken, and I really have taken an interest in what they're doing so that I can educate myself. And that comes from taking a space of being interested in the work and then doing the work that it takes in order to make sure that the seat that I have at the table is a permanent seat and it's not a folding chair. You think that when I took on this role that I'm not thinking about the woman who comes behind me, especially those candidates who are Black, who want to come behind me? I absolutely every day wake up with that on my mind. The expectations are very high, but so is the criticism behind it. And we have to do everything that we can to make sure that we are preparing the next generation of leaders to take that criticism on and to do the work that it's going to take to beat that criticism back.
I I want to just jump in. Thanks, Natasha. That's just such a great story. And that also brings me to like the importance of organizations like the Girl Scout or what Lisa is doing at the Rutgers Women's Center. Because for me, for example, my motivator, my biggest cheerleader was always my mother. I grew up not knowing that I had limitations or that there was something that I am as a woman could not do, because she was always there saying, you can do it, Cheryl. Why are you hesitated? Go for it, go forward. Education wise, oh, that I'm saying the profession, no, she's saying, no, if that's what you want to do, go for it. And that is why even we as women have to be there for other women, particularly the ones coming behind us, because it is just as how we are not seeing it within ourselves. There is always someone there. There should be at least someone there who is seeing it and who is an independent observer, who is there and saying, you have the potential, go for it. Because what we tend to be, well, I grew up as an introvert. I am not, I sort of grew out of that road as I mature, but we tend to take the back seat, even as women. And as Toko did say, that we as women, we tend not to go for it if we think we're over 99 or 98% capable of doing the job, while a man who is only 50% capable will go for it. We want to be 150% sure that we can deliver. And sometimes this is the mistake that we do make. Because, for example, me, I'm always learning. I'm always in the learn mode. So I can go anywhere and sit and hear what is happening in whatever field within the United Nations. They will use their acronyms and they will go off on some, in Jamaica we say highfalutin things to think that you don't understand. But thank God for Google, because you can look and you can say, okay, and you can hold your place. Because it's like an open book. You do not have to know it presently, but be prepared to learn. And that is one of the message that I would give to any woman or anybody, as a matter of fact, my children. Be prepared to learn. You can learn on the job, but go for it. If you think that you're suitable, go for it and make it be dream. Always dream, because for me, people thought that UN, how did you get into the UN? How was that possible? Did you know someone there? I knew no one. But I went for it, and I am now here. I have a seat at the table, and I am sitting down. No one is moving me until I am ready to move or move up further. They say they want a woman Secretary General for the next Secretary General of the UN. Who says it cannot be one of us sitting here at this table?
That's right.
Attending this conference.
Yes.
We need to make ourselves known.
I want to pull the thread on Cheryl's and Natasha's, like, because I think, like, as I was like sitting here smiling, like I'm just like so full of your inspiration in your stories and in your life journeys. It is this growth mindset. That roots us in our ability to conquer the fear of not moving, or the fear of the imposter syndrome, not being good enough or being batted down. And I think that foundationally, certainly for me, like both of my parents have doctorate degrees. They've rooted in me a love of learning from the beginning, but like ever since I could recall in my life, and advocacy. Like advocacy, they advocated for me. Like I was skipped early in school, and I said, oh, I want to be an engineer. It's not like I had engineers around me, but my love of math and science, and this was before it was called STEM, right? It's like, supporting me and encouraging me. So like that from my home life, as my parents laying that foundation, but then also in those moments, I go back to those moments when I'm the only one in the room. I go back to my spirituality. I meditate. I try to go back to beginner's mind in moments to really try to embrace that not everyone knows. And matter of fact, the people in the room may not know as much as you know. And that but in those moments, reframe the conversation to what you know. Like that is important because contextualizing, as I've moved, more and more seniority in the firm, and as I run, lead larger teams and interact with people I mentor, all of that stuff, right? I see that people that can contextualize and really understand how this moment here translates into a moment there, and how they can be the impact in between. That is what to focus on, not the gap itself, but how I can fill the gap and how I'm uniquely positioned to do so. And that helps me reframe it in a way that I can act. If I'm so swirled in what I'm not, it clouds my ability to make good decisions, because it is about risk taking. It is about not knowing. It is about not having all the information. The more senior you get, you're not going to have, and the more responsibilities you get, you're just not going to be informed with everything to move. So you're going to have to use your experience and your relationships and your knowledge and continuously learn and growth mindset to build a way to make decisions. And that is what I see in strong performers, where it's like, this is what's possible. Then it becomes the art of the possible. And that can take us anywhere.
So Anastasia and Lisa, you got to forgive me because I got to jump in here. Cheryl and Toka have my mind swirling with all of these ideas that being a lifelong learner, that part of it is so critically important. None of us knows everything that we need to know for every job that we will ever take on. But being a lifelong learner and learning from not just your peers, learning from people who work underneath you and learning from the people who work above you is extremely important in everything that I've ever done here at Girl Scouts Heart of New Jersey. In addition to that, being a lifelong learner, advocating for myself, teaching my daughters how to advocate for themselves, and making sure that girls continuously within Girl Scouting are advocating for what they want, what they're dreaming about wanting, what their parents wanted for them, is all critically important. That space of dreaming is what has me here today. If I didn't dream about it ever, how could I have ever achieved it? So those two thoughts, I just had to reinforce my co-panelists, Cheryl and Toka. My heart is full, my cup runneth over, and we're running out of time. I feel like we need more time.
Yes,
together.
we need more time.
I know, I was like, we haven't even got to solutions or anything. We're just like celebrating. But, I think because we're running out of time, I just want to say we are wrapping up on this really wonderful note of when we started with pulling up to the table and getting in there, and then that legacy idea is not just about me, it's about the people that got me here. And then I'm trying to make this permanent for those that are coming behind me. That is super inspiring. It's fantastic to hear about the way, the work you're doing, how you're going about being in the roles and the places and the spaces that you're in, and your mindset with how you're approaching what you're doing. And the final idea, which I resonate with you guys on as a professor, with being comfortable with not knowing everything. My students tend to get really anxious when I give them projects that really don't have a solution, and they kind of have to figure it out. And I just think that whole idea of being uncomfortable and knowing that you won't always have everything to move forward, don't let it paralyze you. So Lisa, do we really have to end it now?
I know. I feel like so Anastasia, we should have known originally when we scheduled a 30-minute prep call and we went an hour and a half only because
Yes.
I think we all had to pick up our kids or do something with our kids or make something. This was totally going to go over. There were 3 parts to what we had originally structured this: our successes, our challenges, and what still needs to change. I think it is so powerful that we just spent an hour talking about the successes and that we didn't even get through it. That is so important, and I think so uplifting. There was a question that was asked, as a white male, what can I do? And I know that questions come up a lot. And one of the things that, look, we're all on our different journeys, right? And I still feel like I'm very on my journey as a white woman, but you know, we can read books, you know, How to Be an Anti-Racist, White Fragility, Caste. I mean, there are a whole list. You can go to Diversity Inc. And find out what that list is. There are studies that are coming out now. McKinsey just did a study. Lean In did a study. We at the Center for Women in Business are doing research on the interventions that, with respect to the intersection of how is mentoring and sponsorship and mid-career women, how is that all differing? What is the impact of COVID to unpaid labor? All of that stuff. And some of the other things that, you know, I've read about recently, and I wish we had time to ask the question, but before we even ask the question of what can we do, I think we, us non-Black folks, need to do our homework. Read the books, read the research. Black women are not feeling supported. Why aren't they feeling supported? What can we do? 61% of white men said that they were allies to Black women of color in the workplace. 20-something% have actually done something when they saw racism in the workplace. That's really simple. All you have to do is call it out. Hey, dude, you know, what's going on? So I think we need to start there. So I'm actually really pleased that we didn't spend any time focusing on this. And we focused on the successes, because I don't think that there's usually an opportunity enough to talk about it. You can guarantee, all three of you, Natasha, Toka, Cheryl, we at the center will be following up to maybe do some other recorded stuff so we can get those other parts of the conversation, because I think they're really important and powerful to hear. I just wanted to thank the sponsors of our center. Without these organizations and these companies, we wouldn't be able to do and put on these events like this. So thank you all to them as well. And then for the students that are on, scan this QR code to get your suitable points. Again, grateful for everyone participating. Grateful for Natasha and Toka and Cheryl for sharing your stories. And so grateful for my new partner in crime, Anastasia, for moderating with me.
My pleasure.
So thank you all. And I think that ends our session.